where to start? Many, many years ago, my mother grew up in a very wealthy Jewish family. She went along to a Christian college, and by the time she was 19, she pretty much decided that God of the Bible was not true. She married a guy who'd gone through World War I, had a lot of issues and problems, and by the time she had her third child, she's in bed with a back problem that no one had any answer for, paralysed, and she began to be involved with a little bit of hatha yoga and meditation, which a lot of people say is a very good thing for you. And a woman who used to teach that over in Melbourne, many people believe she was a reincarnation of Jesus Christ. My mother at that stage wasn't convinced until one day she got a knock on the door. My oldest brother invited Anne in, and she said to my mother, "If you will follow me, I will heal you of being paralysed." Within 6 weeks, she's up and walking. Within 3 months, she's completely healed. And she was convinced she'd met and experienced something that was going to change her life forever. She committed her life to this woman and became part of a cult called the Family. She walked out on her husband, walked out upon her 3 kids, and gave her life to serving who she believed was as I said, the reincarnation of Jesus. In 1972, I was born and handed over within 18 months to grow up believing that the leader of this cult was my mother. I spent some 15 years living, meditating. There was hatha yoga, following a mixture of Buddhism and a little bit of Christianity, and as well as a man called Swami Muktananda, which was part of a big Hindu organisation that still exists to this day. We were abused at different times, dunked in water, I guess you call it water torture, deprivation of meals. There was a very structured, very stringent lifestyle. We grew up with fear. I never thought about that there was a God of love who cared, but I didn't believe there was something there. When I was 15, in a moment, my life was changed. 100 police descended on that place and I was rescued. I remember as I left that place saying, you know what, it's as if a page has turned, it's the start of a new life. Little did I know that I was headed down a path to destruction. For now the reins were in my hand and I started in a sense to be in charge. I was made a ward of the state. I began to go to school. I tried to fit in with people around me, had no reference points to fit in, and by the time I was 16 and a half, 17, I was suicidal, very depressed, unable to make sense of life. I remember taking a trip around Central Australia in 1988 with a whole bunch of school kids, some of them I classed as my friend, and by the time I came back, I realised I was an absolute mess. And I had to begin to search for an answer. And so things transpired, and it's astounding how God will step in when someone begins to question life and look for answers. And that happened. I moved in with a foster mother who was a born-again Christian. She began speaking to me about how God was powerful, about how God was real, how he could step in and he could answer prayers and he would listen to anyone who drew near to him and cried out to him. And I began to do this. God, if you're real, make yourself real to me. I'm asking to make it stop raining and start raining whenever I ask. In a period of 6 weeks, whenever, and I mean whenever I asked, this would happen. And I became convinced that there was a spiritual being out there who was all-powerful and all-seeing. And then an authoritative voice came into my mind saying, stop testing me, you know I'm real. Things transpired and I began to get very interested in God, you can imagine. I remember one point there sitting in a Blackburn Baptist pastor's youth office. This is a place in Melbourne, in Blackburn. And as they were praying for me, I had what I look back and say was an encounter with Jesus Christ. And just to shorten it down, Jesus took me back to a place where we were being water tortured, picked me up, put my head against his chest and said, I never meant it to be. Incredible healing comes and you realise there's a God who sees you in your pain, who has the power to reach into your life and draw you and bring you to him. And you would think that would be the end of the story. I'd say I bowed my knee to Jesus Christ. I served him, and 24 years on or longer, I'm a happily married man with 2 children. But I spent a year and a half running away from God. The hounds of heaven pursued me down the highways and byways of horrific sin. By my own choice, by my own will, I began to involve myself with all manner of things which are almost too shameful to speak about. And by the time I eventually moved out of Melbourne and up to Ballarat, I had enough weight, enough things that I'd done that I was ashamed of. Spent an 18th birthday doing all manner of things, getting drunk, visiting places I should never have been. Began to interact with pornography, all manner of stuff. And by the time I eventually was in Ballarat looking for a church for my then girlfriend to head around Australia, I remember lying on my bed one day thinking how far I'd come from that encounter I'd had with Jesus to where I was that day. Feeling the weight of sin, understanding I was so far from God and wanting to be close to him, wanting his help. I came into churches my girlfriend was witness to, felt the presence of God, but even then it was a period where eventually the pastor preached a sermon, which he never did again. He actually had blocks of wood with a thick nail that was being smashed into it. He had a whip fashioned that he smashed against the pulpit. By the end of that sermon, I understood the cost, the personal cost Jesus took for my very personal sin. I didn't respond to the altar call. You'd think you would, wouldn't you? But as I was challenged after by one of the guys in church, he said, have you ever asked Jesus to be your Lord and Saviour? Have you ever asked for forgiveness of your sin? I said, no. He said, you want to do that now? And I thought and said, yes, this is what I need. And I bowed my knee that night. It'd have to be some 23, 24 years ago. And a transformation happened. The weight and the filthiness of my own personal sin rolled away. A fresh start, hope, forgiveness, redemption. Nothing I could manufacture. Nothing anyone I'd ever known who'd grown up in this culture had ever experienced. Jesus stepped in and made me a new creation. And he offers that to every single person here tonight. You can have that. Nothing else will work. And you're going to be challenged at the end of this night. I should say, God's going to offer a relationship to you tonight. And if there's sin standing in the way, he's already covered you. Respond. And God will give you a fresh start, an eternal start forever. Thank you.